Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast. We got a mailbag episode today, RJ. It's been a minute since we've done one of these. Got lots of great questions. I'm really looking forward to being able to answer the community's questions.
Yeah, these are my favorite types of episodes to do because every week we always think we kind of know what we're talking about. Stuff's going on with the team and we have time to think about it, right? It's not some out of the box things too. Mailbag episodes, you get every type of question it feels like that you could get, and you have to think creatively, and it's just fun to answer what the community wants answered, right? That's why we do this, is for the community and everybody. And so to be able to kind of speak a little more directly with them, it's nice.
Yeah, and before we get to the mailbag, we'll of course break down the Mason Marchment trade that occurred during the course of this week. The team won during the course of this week as well. We probably won't talk too much about that because we got to fit in all the mailbag questions, but just throwing that out there because it's been a minute since we've been able to say that on the pod. So I want to acknowledge it. But first, got to thank the law offices of Rico Tessendorf for not only sponsoring the podcast, RJ, but potentially, after we teased the idea of like really linking that with our injury updates, we avoided the deep dive curse today. And I'm personally, I think the credit all goes to Rico.
I agree. Can't argue with you there. I think Rico brought the good vibes as far as the deep dive curse goes because we avoid it completely here. Now, unfortunately, we do have an update on Brandon Montour's injury. So he has been placed on injured reserve. He's expected to be out about 4 weeks after undergoing successful hand surgery. So that answers the mystery question of, okay, what was the injury there? He was involved in a scuffle with Brent Burns. He was throwing some punches down on the ice. Suspected it might be a hand or wrist thing, but weren't sure. Now we know it's a hand injury, about 4 weeks, and that's a tough one for the Kraken. I mean, he's probably the player they can least afford to lose for an extended period of time.
Yeah, not only is he the best player for the Kraken, he was kind of feeling like the one guy that had the chance, besides Philip Grubauer, to go to the Olympics. And I don't know if this is going to potentially affect his ability to do that. I mean, the 4 week timeline should have him okay by the Olympics, but not playing in hockey games when you're kind of a bubble roster player probably isn't a great thing as far as just letting, the team see you.
Yeah, it hurts just that showcase ability. And I think Montour has made a good case for himself already. And GMs are always paying attention, right? It's not like they're going to just disregard him now because he's hurt if he's going to be back for the Olympics, but it does make it that much tougher. Recency bias is real. And if somebody shows up and plays really well, and there's a lot of very good Canadian defensemen over the next month, unfortunately, that might do him in.
Yep. But that's going to do it for that injury update brought to you by the law offices of Rico Tessendorf, personal injury attorney. I'll just kind of work that in right there. While we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Now, real quick before we get to the mailbag, RJ, Mason Marchment was traded this week. Give us the details.
All right, so the Kraken trade Mason Marchment, they got it in just before that holiday roster freeze, and we were looking at maybe a deal happening before then. His name was out there in rumblings. The deal does go ahead. So it's Mason Marchment to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a 2027 second round pick. That one belongs to the Minnesota Wild, so it's Minnesota's second round pick. And then a 2026 fourth round pick belonging to the New York Rangers. So a second and a fourth for Mason Marchment. Now, Dylan, I gave my initial thoughts on the Marchment trade. I was kind of scrambling in travel mode and everything, but I got him out, did a little video for Instagram and everything, but haven't really had the chance to talk to you about it. What do you think of this deal?
I love the deal, right? Like, I mean, to get the second round pick, I think it was huge for a player who, frankly, has struggled through much of this season. I think, there's lots of reasons for that. Ultimately, he just really was not a fit in Seattle with what they were trying to do and where the rest of the roster was. And so I think to be able to turn an asset that was pretty substantially struggling into a return that includes the fourth, but especially that second round pick, I'm pretty impressed with what Jason Bottrell was able to do there. I know the second round pick is a year out, but kind of given the length of the build that it looks like the Kraken are kind of staring down, I don't think that that really affects their timeline too much. And if the difference is a second next year versus, say, a third this year, I'm all for getting that, higher value asset, even if it's a year out, given where the Kraken are right now.
Yeah, and I think the return is fine. Like it's not great, but it's fine, just given what they paid, because they gave up a third earlier and a fourth. So you don't make a huge profit on this deal, but given that the experiment definitely did not go well, I think you can't really expect a huge profit on it. That's just what happens when you take a swing and you miss. And that's okay. It's still good asset management by Jason Bottrell. I like that element of it. And as far as Marchment going, I said this on the video. I think this is probably addition by subtraction given his recent run of play. I think whoever's going to be in that spot is going to do better than Marchment was doing. It wasn't a good fit. We said on this very podcast a couple weeks ago that we were kind of done with him. Mm-hmm. We were just finished with him as a Seattle Kraken. We didn't really want him to be here much longer, and that's the case. He was just the obvious player to move out.
Yeah, exactly. And addition by subtraction, I mean, they won without him.
That's true. I guess if you want to look, there's a bunch of other factors, but they did win without him. Now, I should mention Marchment does score in his first game with Columbus. I think he's going to be a much better fit there than he was in Seattle, and so it has the potential to be a win-win trade.
Yeah. I watched that game because down here in Southern California, got the Ducks game, so I was watching the Ducks game and the Kraken game together, and he did look like he fit in a lot better there in Columbus under Dean Evison. Just the kind of coach he needs.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what you want for all these players, is to be in a team that's a good fit for them, in a spot that they can succeed. So as much as we've talked about Marchment and kind of maybe wanting him gone, wish him the best of luck in Columbus.
Yep.
All right, let's get to the mailbag.
Yeah.
All right, so opening up the mailbag here. I cannot wait. We've got lots of great questions. So thank you, everybody who sent in questions. We get tons of questions every time, and it makes it nice and easy on us. Only hard thing is we got to get through it fast enough to make it, one episode instead of two. So I will just get started. Now, the first question here from TV Dinner follows from your prospect chat, Dylan. And I've cut out all the nice words about your prospect chat and how great that was for the brevity's sake, of course.
Yeah.
But TV Dinner was wondering something. As a newish hockey fan, I realized I don't really understand what it means for someone to be drafted by an NHL team. And talking about Kraken prospect Loki Krantz, who you mentioned on the prospect chat. So Krantz was drafted by the Kraken. Does that mean he's obligated to play for a minor league team that's affiliated with the Kraken at a certain point? Or can he play in Sweden for certain teams until Kraken management decides he should come over to North America and play in a minor league team? Is he obligated to play hockey at all? What obligations do the Kraken have to him? Is being drafted like a legal contract between the team and the player that sets out a list of responsibilities that each party has to each other? Does he get paid by the Kraken at all? So there's a few questions wrapped up into that one. I've got my notes here about just how contracts work and the drafting process. Do you want to get it started, or should I?
Yeah, I mean, I have, kind of with drafted players' rights and the different, based on where they are in the world and what league they play in, kind of how long the drafting team holds those rights, because I think that's kind of a relevant, part of the conversation here to answer. And so I'll kind of give a quick lowdown for that. It all depends on where the drafted player is coming from, what league they're playing in. For example, if a player is drafted out of the Canadian Hockey League, one of the major junior teams, say the Everett Silvertips, the Kraken or the drafting team holds that player's rights, and the rights being an exclusive negotiating period. Essentially, no other team can go and talk to that player and try to sign them or anything like that. The NHL team, in this case the Kraken, own that player's rights for 2 years after the draft. After that, those rights expire, and depending on the age of that player, if they're under 20, they would re-enter the draft as a 19-year-old, old 19-year-old, or if they're over the age of 20, they just become a free agent, essentially capable of signing with any team. If the player is going the NCAA route, the college route, those rights for the NHL team that drafts them at 18 last for 4 years. So they get a little extra time because the player might want to see out their college education. It might take the 4 years. The NHL team is given that window of time and opportunity to keep the exclusive rights to that prospect throughout their college career. And then those rights expire I think 30 days after their season ends for their senior year. And then at that point, they would become a free agent capable of talking to other teams. And we have seen players go that route and then not end up signing with the team that drafted them. For European prospects, for most European prospects, and really just prospects from anywhere else in the world, it's similar to that NCAA thing where the drafted rights last for 4 seasons. So in this case, for Loke Krantz, because he plays in Sweden, it would be 4 years. The Kraken have his rights for 4 seasons. So really 3.5 years left that they have the rights to negotiate an entry-level contract, bring him over to North America. The only difference is with Russia, where those rights can go longer than 4 years. And I was trying to nail down exactly where we're at, given the most recent CBA on that, if it's a 6-year window or if it's indefinite with Russia, because the KHL is the one league that the NHL does not have a player transfer agreement with currently. They have agreements with all other leagues, whether it's the major junior leagues here in North America or the European leagues like Liga in Finland or the SHL in Sweden. So I don't know exactly where the Russian player thing stands, but it's either 6 years or forever until a team decides to just relinquish their rights, which does happen pretty frequently with the Russian prospects if they don't come over. So that's kind of the situation with Loke Krantz. The Kraken will hold his rights for 4 years. If he doesn't ever sign with the Kraken during that time, he just becomes a free agent and any team can approach him and sign him at that point. It's unlikely to happen. Usually what happens in this situation is what we saw with, say, Yanni Newman. Granted, he was playing in Finland versus Sweden with Krantz, but plays until the team feels like he's ready to make that transition to North America, at which point they sign him to his ELC. And then once they're signed to their ELC, they have to play in the Kraken organization with one of their minor league affiliates, such as the Coachella Valley Firebirds, which is really where all these guys would go.
Yeah, that's when things change, really, is when players do sign a contract. Again, there's no obligation to sign them to a contract once you draft them, but once they sign a contract, then they have to play in that Kraken system or get loaned somewhere else. So, I mean, just do a quick rundown on the individual questions. Does that mean he's obligated to play for a minor league team that's affiliated with the Kraken at a certain point? Once he's signed, then that's where he would have to be. Or can he play in Sweden for certain teams until they decide he can come over to North America? Yes, he can do that. And the signing, the contract signing would be the point at which it would change. Is he obligated to play hockey at all? No, he's not. He has no obligation to play hockey in the first place. And then what obligations do the Kraken have to him as being drafted like a legal contract between the team and the player? Really being drafted, it's not. What it is, I think a best way to think about it is just that it's an agreement among the NHL teams that when you draft a player, that means that no other NHL team can go approach them, talk to them, sign them to a contract. It's just exclusivity amongst NHL teams. That's what it is. And then does he get paid by the Kraken at all? Not until signing that contract.
Yep.
So running that down. Good question. Good questions there from TV Dinner. I always like these educational ones. And then we've got 4 here, and we'll try and do kind of rapid fire because we've got a lot of questions here, but these 4 from Chuck that are more rules-based questions. So the first one, the PWHL uses a jailbreak rule where a shorthanded goal releases the penalized player. Does this apply only to minor penalties or does it apply to major penalties? And then if a team is down 2 players, 5-on-3, and scores a shorthanded goal, are both players released from the box or only one? So first off, it just applies to minor penalties. For majors, the jailbreak rule does not apply. And then the 5-on-3 one, I wasn't 100% sure on this, but Dylan, I know you have the answer.
Yeah, so I combed my way through the PWHL rule book, and if there are 2 penalties, the jailbreak rule only applies to one player coming out of the box. Whichever penalty was taken first, if they were both taken at the same time, only one player is going to leave. So it would just go to a 5-on-4 situation, and the shorthanded team would have to continue killing off a penalty or to go out and try to get a second jailbreak goal in order to release the second player from the penalty box. The same thing kind of applies if one player has a double minor. So if one player takes a double minor penalty and is in the box and the jailbreak goal is scored while that player is serving the first 2 minutes of their total of 4 minutes, the player stays in the box because it just kills off the time remaining from that first penalty, but the second penalty is still on the books if it's scored during that second 2 minutes. If they've already killed off 2 minutes, they're into that second 2 minute window and the jailbreak goal is scored, then the player is released from the box. So that's kind of how the jailbreak works, which we saw yesterday in the Torrent game. Unfortunately, not for the right team.
Yeah, but right way to remember that is just, one jailbreak goal equals one penalty off the board. Good question there, Chuck. Next one. We know a goal can't be scored directly by kicking the puck or batting it in with a hand. What if there's intervening contact? For example, a player kicks or bats the puck, it deflects off a defender, and then goes into the net. Is that goal allowed? So in the situation you just described where it deflects off a defender after being batted in or kicked in, the goal would not count. And we've seen a few examples of that. I think even with the Kraken fairly recently where there was like a high stick or something off the goalie and in. Excuse me, that goal does not count. What you need is basically like possession for the play to continue. If it goes to another team's player, they kind of have it with their stick or whatever, and then put it in their own net, then that goal is going to count. But if there's just some contact off another player, that goal still doesn't count. Now, as far as other intervening contact, let's say, you kick the puck toward the net, but then it goes off of your teammate's stick, which would then be like a legal touch. That goal would count. So because then the last contact is off the stick. But as far as just deflections off other players, no, that doesn't count. All right, so next question. Goals are sometimes overturned because the puck was contacted by a stick above the height of the crossbar. Does this rule apply only to the blade of the stick, or could a goal be scored off the shaft or knob of the stick if that contact point is above the crossbar, even if the blade itself is below it? It's an interesting scenario where you go off the shaft of the stick here, but the blade is below, but it's wherever the puck makes contact with the stick. That's where they're looking at in relation to the crossbar. So they're just looking at that point of contact. And so if it's above the crossbar, no goal. If it's below, it's a goal. And then we've seen players successfully pull off the lacrosse-style Michigan goal, and we also regularly see players scoop the puck up onto their stick and flip it to officials after an icing. Could a player theoretically pick up the puck and fling or throw it toward the net on a penalty shot or shootout attempt, choosing high or low once the puck is already elevated? Is there a rule that would prohibit this, or is it just something not tried for practical reasons? So there's no rule prohibiting it as long as it's not touched with a high stick. That's kind of the relevant rule, right? You can't have it up high on your stick, but you could kind of flick it up in the air and shoot it. It's just very difficult to do. It's just not tried for practical reasons, really. It's so rare to be able to pull that off, especially in traffic during play, near impossible. But we have seen some shootout attempts, mostly in like skills competitions for teams and things. We saw Shane Wright pick up the puck and do the little Spinorama Michigan thing in the shootout. That worked. That would be totally legal. But as Shane Wright said after that, he said to me, he's like, look, I think Dan would have killed me if I tried that in a real game or in a shootout. So I think players just aren't going to try it.
Yeah, because what you don't want to have happen is for anything to go wrong in that process that would then nullify the attempt, right? Like the puck starts going, momentum starts going the other way because something happens. You don't pick it up clean, anything like that. It's just an added wrinkle for not much more benefit. I think that it just doesn't make sense for a player to attempt that in one of those key situations like a shootout or a penalty shot.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it with the rules questions. Thank you everybody for those. I mean, I always enjoy answering those, kind of getting more insight on the rules of the game and learning some stuff myself, as I usually do with these two. So I've separated, I forgot to get to it at the top, but I've separated the questions into rough categories. So those were like rules, educational ones. I've got coaching or lines, then armchair GM type questions. Then I have the hypothetical / counterfactual category. Then, and you saw this all in the notes still, so I'm sure you think I'm a little crazy, but just over categorizing this. Then I've got big picture stuff, and then finally other at the end. So just letting everybody know these are going to be sorted a little bit by category. So let's go into the coaching and lines questions. First one from Fiona. What are more specific reasons that Fleury and Mahura are always healthy scratched? Is it a specific aspect of their game, lack of seniority? And just something that Fiona is curious about as a somewhat new hockey fan. It is a good question, especially seeing them scratched kind of night in, night out when everyone on the blue line is healthy. I think simple answer, they're just lower on the depth chart. The Kraken have 6 established NHL veteran defensemen, and Mahura and Fleury are kind of tweeners. They're like 7th D types. And so kind of seniority, but really it's just the level of skill that the coach is still there at.
Right. The coach is going to set the lineup that he feels each and every night gives his team the best opportunity to win. And when you see players that are scratched regularly, it's generally just comes down to they're just not as skilled, to put in layman's terms, maybe just not good enough or not better than somebody above them in the depth chart. And so the coaches just don't feel like they give them a better chance to win. It feels weird. It feels bad to say that, but that's essentially what it comes down to.
Yep, that's basically it. Next question here from Leo. Really enjoyed the podcast conversation around Stevie. This leads me to a comment and a question for the mailbag. So the comment, I don't think it's any surprise the team is just bad when any of McCann, Schwartz, and Eberle are not healthy. And the question, though, I understand the concept of playing high ceiling prospects against good players and with your best players to help them get used to that level. Do you think the team feels like they don't have the caliber of player that would warrant that usage with Shane, or is Matty more important and still developing where he needs it more? And then adding, when Matty's on a line with McCann and Eberle, he plays noticeably better. Shane has had that opportunity as well, although with seemingly less patience, but he also doesn't seem to play better when given that opportunity. So talk about the players put around Matty Beniers and Shane Wright, the opportunities that they're in. You know, that's been a big topic of conversation around the team. I don't know, Dylan, what do you think?
I mean, there's a lot of different factors to this question. I think ultimately at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to what I was just talking about with the previous question, where the coach, his obligation, and most vast majority of the time, and certainly Lane Lambert's obligation right now, is to put out the lineup that he feels gives the team the best opportunity to win each and every night. And so he is going to prioritize veteran players. He's going to prioritize a player in, say, Matty Beniers over one like Shane Wright, because Matty Beniers is just more proven and is able to deliver more on a night in, night out basis, right? His offensive ceiling may not be as high as Shane Wright's, but it's a lot more consistent, his game, than say what we've seen out of Shane Wright so far in his career. And so a coach like Lane Lambert, that consistency matters. And so you're going to, try to roll your best players with, say, Matty Beniers and give that line more ice time than you would, say, with Shane Wright, just because of kind of how inconsistent he has been offensively throughout his career. So I think so much of these coaching questions, and certainly the lineup questions, just get broken down and boiled down to that one point of the coach is putting out the lineup that he thinks can deliver a win on any given night. And it's just kind of as simple as that. Now, if things change later on in the season, or kind of the way that we thought they would have changed last year, where the team is out of it, they're not going to be making the playoffs in development, and the team has kind of signaled that they're turning things over and they want to be more in a rebuild mode and they want to focus on development for young players, that's when I think you start seeing things like Shane there being more patience and more minutes for somebody like Shane. And you start seeing him play with better players out there to try to build up his confidence, get him used to that pace of play and all of those kinds of things. But it has to be signaled essentially from the whole organization that we're kind of done this year, but we still have games left before we're going to see something like that.
Exactly. And that really hasn't ever been the case for the Kraken, just ever. So it's just not something that we're used to seeing. But I think you did a good job of just saying, look, the general theme is the coach is going to play the best lineup any given night. And I think that also relates to Rob's question here. Last year, we wasted opportunities to develop younger players after we're out of it. Given Lane's prioritization of vets over young guys and how harshly he punishes the young guys when they make mistakes, how likely are we to do that again? Talk me off the ledge. I'm going to have a hard time talking you off the ledge here, Rob, if I'm being honest, because look, I think it's very likely that would be the case again. And especially given the position the Kraken are in. Look, the wild card race in the West is just so bad. All of these teams, that even if the Kraken are last place in the West for a little while, they may not be fully out of it or view themselves as fully out of it. And so as long as they're in it, Lambert's going to be just like any really NHL head coach. It's not even a Lane Lambert thing. He's just going to play the lineup. He gives his team the best chance to win. And that's going to mean less opportunity for the younger players.
Right. Like I said, the only time coaches kind of go the other way and they will start focusing on that development is if it is clear from the organization, and the organization has made it clear to the fan base and just everybody that is what the priority is. The priority is no longer winning games. It is developing young players. Lane Lambert, I do believe if the organization was to say, hey, we want to shift gears and we want to focus on the development the rest of the year, we kind of understand where we're at and that the playoffs are not going to happen for us. This is what we'd like to do. I think Lane Lambert would do that. He's a coach, and he would, respect what his bosses are essentially telling him to do, but he's not going to do that on his own. And what we've seen so far is that the organization seems extremely reluctant to kind of signal that to the fan base, to tell the coach that, hey, development of the young players is now the priority. It's not winning. And it's a tough decision for teams to make, to basically say we are no longer prioritizing winning, and especially when you still have a fairly veteran heavy roster the way the Kraken do. So I think the only way we see that happening is if they continue to struggle over the next month and a half. You maybe get right before the roster freeze for the Olympics, not even all the way to the trade deadline. If the Kraken trade away some of the veteran players, that might be a signal. And they might kind of then use the Olympic break to kind of look at things and say, okay, the last 2 months, month and a half of the season, we are going to prioritize development. They can communicate that to Lane. And then I think Coach Lambert would adjust things accordingly. But that's a lot of ifs.
It is a lot of ifs. It would take a lot for that adjustment to be made. But yeah, I think sending out more veteran players, that would be the real signal that that type of move would be made. That's what to look for. So final coaching question here. This one from Bo. Bo asking how much of Seattle's struggles should be laid on the shoulders of Lane Lambert, and Bo believes all of it, and then goes on to talk about how you have to know this playing style of the team, have a playing style that fits your team. And Bo believes that this style, this Lane Lambert style, isn't really suited to the Kraken players' individual strengths, and that you need to give more opportunity to the younger players. A little frustrated with the dump and chase kind of thing, which not the first one to call that out. And then, so with this question from Bo about how much of the responsibility should be laid on Lambert's shoulders, I'm sorry, Bo, I got to disagree with you on some of these points. It's certainly the all of it, because I really don't think much of it at all is on Lane Lambert. Look, the Kraken in the last 3 years have had 3 very different coaches. None of them have gotten this core of players to work. And I will say this about Lambert, he's at least gotten effort out of the group consistently. Mm-hmm. And that's more than Dave Haxtell or Dan Bilesma could say. And the problems with this group lie in the roster construction. It lies much beyond coaching. And I think when you see results that aren't good enough from 3 coaches, 3 very different coaches in 3 years, I don't know how you put it on coaching.
Yeah, I think it's not on Lane Lambert. I'm with you. I wouldn't put this on him, especially because, look, Lane Lambert would have laid out what his plans are for the team during the interview process, right? That's what the interview process between organizations and potential head coaching candidates is bringing that coach in and saying, okay, what would you do here? And I think that what Lane Lambert laid out with this kind of more defensive approach, and trying to limit what other teams can do, rely on your good goaltending, and kind of, just try to win 1-goal hockey games, quite frankly, was probably the best path forward for this Kraken team. If they were indeed focused on winning games over developing young talent, I think Lane Lambert was the perfect coach pick for that. I genuinely believe he gave them, amongst the candidates that were available to them, that wanted to talk to the Kraken, is I guess key there. He was the guy who probably gave them the best opportunity to do that. We've talked in the past, the roster does not have a lot of cohesion. Like, there is no obvious style of play for me when I look at this roster that I would say, wow, this fits even 7, 8, 9 of the forwards, right? Like, there's just not a lot of similarities in play style amongst this team. It is a very kind of piecemeal, puzzle piece, shoved together kind of roster. And so it wasn't, I don't think there was going to be an obvious style pick when going out there for the organization and interviewing coaches to kind of be like, okay, this guy gets what we've done with the roster and is going to be able to get the most out of it. I genuinely think a Lane Lambert approach of just everybody's going to have to learn how to play suffocating defense was probably just their best path forward. As for, not playing the young guys and all of that stuff, I mean, it goes back to what we were just talking about. No coach is just going to willingly put out a young lineup and just be like, yeah, I'm just going to take it upon myself to develop these young players. Even though that's part of a coach's job, is to develop young players, they are, NHL coaches, I think their shelf life is now under 3 years officially, as far as how long they have jobs and what their job security is. Wins matter for them more than anything else. That is what they have to focus on if they want to stay employed. I don't really blame them given that they're going to prioritize wins unless the organization tells them to prioritize developing players and gives them assurances that, hey, as long as the players look like they're making improvements, we'll keep you employed even if the wins aren't there.
Yeah, it's just a simple incentives game, right? For coaches, and coaches are going to go based off those incentives. I look, just after the last 3 years, the problems are elsewhere. Like that, you can rotate you can try 3 or 4 more coaches with this team or whatever. As long as the score is the same, they're not going to have consistent success. So now we transition to the armchair GM type questions. My favorite. Aside from maybe other, I think other is probably my favorite category, really. But other than that, the armchair GM. We got the first one from Rob, also known as Four Horsemen. Please answer this independently from each other. So we've abided by your instructions. We have not talked about this at all, as I would be curious if they're different in the list. Which are the 3 NHL teams that would benefit most from a trade for Chandler Stevenson? Now, benefit is an interesting word here. And I think there are some trades that you could cook up where a team would benefit from acquiring Chandler Stevenson. I think a lot of them would involve retained money or clearing out bad money. I think he's a net negative asset if you just trade the full contract to somebody right now, but I'm going to be a little creative with this. But I have my list of 3 teams, Dylan. I'll list these 3 out and we'll see if there's any overlap. The first one I have is the Minnesota Wild, because they have a hole at 2C with sending out Marco Rossi in the Quinn Hughes deal. They could probably use another center. I think they have other players. They have wingers who are pretty good and defensively responsible that you could pair with Stevenson to maybe mask some of those deficiencies defensively. I think it would certainly require some retained money or something to kind of sweeten that for Minnesota, but they do have the hole at 2C. So that's one of the teams I could see. There's another one in Chicago, and I'm just going with sticking with their theme of just having a bunch of guys. They brought in Andre Burakovsky, who are just awful defensively, but they can produce points. Stevenson would fit right in. He also, as long as they don't have him get in the way of their other young centers, actually, that's a problem. They could have, Kraken issues with that. As long as they're smart about it and just play him down the lineup, it should work okay. He could give their other centers, the ability to maybe even kick out to wing for a little bit if they need to lighten some of the responsibility. But I don't know, Chicago for style of play reasons. And then also the St. Louis Blues. I know they're looking for centers. They don't seem to want to embrace the whole rebuild thing. And so if they're able to clear out some bad money, I know they've got Shen or some of their defensemen, maybe you could do a swap or something there. But those are the 3 teams I have.
Yeah, I tried not to focus too much on the contract thing because going down that rabbit hole really made it like, God, there just would be nobody. So I kind of just tried to go for, teams that would be interested in actually making a move around this. And the 3 that I had, well, one was taken off the board because they made a different move. And that was, of course, the Montreal Canadiens, who kind of did a 2C kind of brought in, and they brought in, of course, Philip Deneau. They traded for him, bring him back into the fold there in Montreal. So I had to swap Montreal off my list, but my list of 3 is Detroit. They have a pretty big hole at center behind Dylan Larkin, who centers their top line. And just based on kind of who they've drafted and everything like that, they have Nate Danielson and stuff, who should be coming up and be a good player for them. But I feel like they would have the opportunity to, say, trade for a Chandler Stevenson right now. They're first in their division, try to build a lead within the Atlantic and do something there. And then in future seasons, he can get worked down the lineup as, say, Danielson gets more prepared and ready to take on the 2C responsibilities and things like that. They could just kind of work him down the lineup. So Detroit was my first team. I did really seriously look at Minnesota, and then I was like, RJ's probably going to pick Minnesota. So
Me too well.
I didn't want to have overlap there. And so I actually chose Utah because it's one, this year it fixes the problem of Logan Cooley being out for a significant amount of time. And so they would have him there. It gives you some ability to, when negotiating with Nick Schmaltz, if he's going to go in free agency or you don't want to pay him what he wants, you do have a backup kind of option there in Chandler Stevenson. They have cap space for days. Like, this is a team that could deal with that contract. And again, it's one where he could flex into the top 6 when needed. Otherwise, I think he fits their play style as a third line center. And so I just thought, like, third line center on that team, he could feast on some premium matchups play the style of game that they want. I think he actually wouldn't be a terrible fit as a long-term 3C in Utah. So they were my second team. And then the last team, I have no idea how this would work money-wise. It would only be if they really wanted to dump some contracts. And for some reason, Chandler Stevenson was the guy they wanted to bring in. And that's just him going back to Vegas, where again, they kind of have a center depth problem a little bit there, but they could bring him in. He understands the system. He understands everything there. He already has good working relationships with lots of the wingers that they have, and so they could really shuffle things around. And quite frankly, Jack Eichel and Tomas Hertl, they're kind of two centers in the top six, both have extensive injury histories. You could pretty safely count on one of them missing time at any given point during the season. And so having Chandler Stevenson again to feast on 3C matchups, but then flex in your top six and not have to change your play style, it's probably a little bit of an attractive thing for them. But again, I have no idea how the money would work there.
I mean, the cap is going up, but yeah, they're going to have trouble there. The play for Vegas, I think, would be to get the Kraken to retain about $2 million, make Stevenson roughly a $4 million player. At that point, it could make sense given the fit for your team, and it's a little better for the Kraken than a buyout, and so that would be my pitch if I was Vegas's GM there. So. Next question here, and this is a scary one from Chuck. If the Kraken are somehow still in the wild card mix near the trade deadline, say they're a couple points back or barely holding the last spot, and the roster is largely unchanged, how would you approach it? Do you let the season play out and accept the risk of losing pending UFAs for nothing? Do you trade selectively, moving some assets to acquire help for a playoff push? Or do you commit fully to selling, trade as many UFAs as possible, and try and justify that decision to the fan base despite still being in the race? Also follow up with that. How do you handle the Jordan Eberle in that situation? Do you have a conversation with him about potentially going to a legit cup contender? Do you keep his role as captain? All of that. How do you handle Eberle? So for me, Dylan, this is like the worst case scenario. This one was scary thinking it out because I know what would happen. Like ownership and the GM and everything would delude themselves into thinking this is real and they'll hang on to everybody. They might even re-sign some people. If it was me, I would sell all but one or two UFAs. But then again, I don't believe in this core long term. I think big changes are needed. So if it was up to me, that's what I would do. The bar is as low as it'll ever be. I don't want a repeat of season 2 where everyone thinks this is fine. We don't need to make changes just because we snuck into the playoffs. Although, making the playoffs would help if you think you really could get there, but I just don't think this team can get there. So as for Eberle, I would do whatever he wants to do. I'd give him that respect as captain and approach and be like, look, do you want to go somewhere else? If so, we'll send you somewhere else. We'll try and send you to your preferred destination. We'll do right by you and all that stuff. But I'm a little biased because I do think they should probably move on from him after this season anyway. So that's my opinion. What would you do, Dylan?
Well, if it was me, what I would be doing is I would have used this recent stretch of struggle, and I would have used it to not just move out Mason Marchment, but maybe move out one or two other pieces already so that you then don't find yourself in the situation where come Olympic break, you're still in it and all of that, right? Like I would have taken advantage of the fan base understanding that changes needed to be made right now and making those changes right now. And then you also save yourself the headache of if the team kind of corrects and comes back up to the mean and then is, say sitting 6 points out of a playoff spot come Olympic break, you don't have to deal with as many questions around this. So that would kind of be the approach I would take if I was truly in charge. I'm with you. I think if they're in that situation, I don't think we see too much movement. I think I think the one trade that's inevitable is a Jamie Alexiak trade because I just genuinely don't think there's any chance they re-sign him. And the return would be too substantial to ignore and try to keep him for a playoff push and just throw away whatever asset you could get back for him because you could genuinely probably get a first round pick or something back for him. So I think you have to do that Jamie Alexiak deal. And you have Josh Mahura, who has proven himself this season and last season as being completely capable of coming in and being your sixth defenseman. And so it just makes no sense to me for Jamie Alexiak to stay around given the situation. So I think Jamie Alexiak is getting traded no matter what. I think ultimately, yeah, I'm with you. You have the conversation with Jordan Eberle. Would not shock me if this conversation has already been had with Jordan Eberle over the course of last offseason. I bet they talked to a lot of the upcoming UFAs over the offseason just to kind of see where they're at. What would it take for you to stay here? Like, what, if the season goes this way or that way, how does that make you feel? All of that kind of stuff. That's a pretty standard thing to do. And so my guess is that those conversations have already happened. They already know what Jordan Eberle's answer is. And so we'll see based on if he gets moved or not. Kind of, we'll know what he wants. But I think that's just the way you handle it, is you talk to the player, and it's not just Jordan Eberle. I think you give that respect to Alexiak, to Jaden Schwartz, to all the guys, and you kind of see where they're at and what they would want. You kind of go from there. But yeah, I think, I mean, Jaden Schwartz is the only guy I would consider bringing back. I think it's kind of the same thing for you out of this group. That being said, if somebody wants to give me a nice offer for him, I'm taking it. Like, I think the assets are just more valuable for this team right now.
Yeah, same here. And with your Alexiak answer, I think you already started on the first question here from Sam. Had a few rapid fire ones here. With which UFA is most likely to be traded? And so I think your answer to that would be Jamie Alexiak, right?
Yep.
For all the reasons you said. So next, which UFA is most likely staying put?
I mean, for me, it's probably Jaden Schwartz, just because I think the benefits of what he brings to the lineup and the ability for him to play with any of your developing young players is probably makes him the most valuable piece to retain.
Yeah, if it's not Schwartz, Ellie Tolvanen, I think, because he's youngest, he can kind of fit in any system. Coaches love him. And so I could see him maybe returning. Certainly if they try and go with more of a youth movement, have the veterans go out, then it might be Tolvanen. Who's the big dark horse trade candidate for the team, do you think?
I mean, if they want to take a big swing, which they've reiterated recently that they do, I don't know, is Shane Wright considered a dark horse trade candidate?
I think he would be, yeah.
Yeah, then I think him, because I think if the team is going to make a big deal trade, Shane Wright's got to be a part of it.
Yeah, agreed on that. But I'll give another name so we're not just repeating. I think Vince Dunn, and it wouldn't be something that would happen in the regular season. That would be part of another big swing, especially with Brandon Montour playing as well as he is. You don't need another defenseman as good as Vince Dunn. If you can afford, if you can't afford it, right? If you need to go out and get a good forward, he could be a good trade piece for you. Also, that contract, he's got 1 year after this one, kind of in a Jared McCann type situation contract wise. So it could be him. And then finally, which player, non-UFA, do you want to get traded?
I mean,
a little awkward for us, but
it is an awkward question for us. I mean, if
put on your armchair GM hat, Dylan.
Right. If coaches are always going to be in the situation where they want to put out the more veteran player, I think for that reason and for the future development of all the centers that the Kraken have, you need to clear space down the middle, and Stevie is the one veteran center. And so I think for that reason, it makes sense to say Chandler Stevenson.
Oh yeah, he's the obvious answer for me. I felt like it was a bit of a cop-out, so I had a couple alternate answers because I figured you would say Stevenson.
One of the guys, Lars for you.
No, of the guys with positive value, that's my filter that I used. Either Vince Dunn, just because I think they need to be a little bit more forwards type balanced, right? And he's the movable piece like I just talked about, or alternately Shane Wright, just because I feel bad for him. I think he'll have a lot of success with wherever his next team is. And if I'm focused on his best interest, then yeah, he'd be the guy I'd want to see get traded, unfortunately.
I mean, I've been saying it for a while now. It is in Shane Wright's best interest at this point to be with a different organization, I think.
Yeah. And I think he'll have a lot of success when he does do that. Next question here. This one from Seattle Kraken GM. Acknowledging that any player is worth whatever a GM pays for him, what is your best guess for the trade deadline return for pending free agents Schwartz, Eberle, Marchment, Tolvanen, and Alexiak? And then bonus question, is it worth selling McCann this season for a complete refresh next year? For Marchment, I'll guess a second and a fourth.
Yeah.
I'll start with him. I'm just going to do draft pick equivalents because it's so hard with prospects and stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say for Jaden Schwartz, I'd maybe just stop short of a first, maybe like 2 seconds equivalent or a good prospect. For Eberle, I would say maybe low first equivalent, but chances are the return might be less than you think if he is moved, just because they'll probably want to send him somewhere he wants to go. They're going to, maybe work with fewer teams that way. We saw that with Mark Giordano in Toronto. Tolvanen, maybe a second. And Alexiak, I think he's the guy who could maybe fetch a late first.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with really all of those. It wouldn't shock me if Schwartz was like a second and a third kind of situation.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Split over years too.
Yeah, that's how it usually is. And then as for McCann this season, look, they should be listening on him all the time, and you'd have to get an offer that really wows you and knocks your socks off. And if you get that, whenever it happens, you got to pull the trigger on it. But it all just depends on when or if you'd get that offer. But I think it'd be more likely in the offseason.
I agree, and I think Jared McCann is the one player that truly has value of keeping him around to play with your young developing players and trying to re-sign him for longer term. Like compared to anybody else, I think he is the one player that kind of makes sense for, and depending on what number he's looking at and if that makes sense for you. But having Jared McCann to pair with a Matty Beniers or a Shane Wright, or 2 years down the line a Jake O'Brien, I think like that is something significant to developing your young players, that even though he probably doesn't fit as far as his timeline for his prime with the rest of the group, he will help elevate them and get them there sooner just by having him play out there with them.
And he's the kind of guy also that I would want in the locker room. And if we talk of trading McCann, it's all from like an asset management roster building thing. I think he's a guy that's helpful to have in the room. I would hate to have him gone, but you have to make trade-offs.
Yeah.
So next question here from Blake. Assuming the front office does go into a full rebuild sooner rather than later, do we have enough in the farm system plus whatever we might get from selling off to build around Beniers and Wright? So my initial thought on that is no, but there may be enough to build around Beniers, Wright, Catton, O'Brien if he turns out, and whoever you get with a high pick this year, which if you're going into full rebuild, you should be getting a high pick this year. Maybe there's enough around all of them.
Right. And I think that's the big thing when it comes to this stuff is, as much as the Kraken have a lot of promising prospects, for the most part, what drives a team is a 2 or 3 player core, right? Of guys that are just hit an elevated level. And then the rest of the roster just kind of gets filled out through drafted prospects that you bring in, traded prospects you bring in, and just UFA signings of depth pieces, right? Like that's just what most teams kind of end up becoming. And I think the Kraken have a lot of good in-house options already to just kind of sprinkle in and fill in gaps in the lineup. What they're missing is the players that look like they can be those 2 or 3 core pieces that are going to be point per game players, that are going to really be able to drive and produce success and elevate the people around them and all of that. And Shane Wright and Matty Beniers have that potential. They're both top 5 picks. You need to get them there. And I think the longer that they're not there, it starts to become a question of whether or not they can still get there. Again, we're seeing so many players around the NHL hit that level at an earlier and earlier age. So it starts becoming concerning the deeper into their 20s that they go, that they're not there. But you have still top 10 picks in Berkeley Catton, Jake O'Brien. If you can land another top 5 pick this year, I think you have enough, because really all that matters is that, like, say 3 player core. If you have that, you can build out the rest of the roster, like through free agency or draft picks or whatever.
It's easy.
We've seen
the Kraken do that a bunch. Bjorkstrand, Marchment, all those little trades. It's easy.
It's super, super easy. The difficult bit is finding those true difference-making players that you can build the team around. And I think right now the jury is just still out with the Kraken. And so as much as the Carson Rykoffs and the Jagger Ferguses and all of those kinds of guys matter to a point, they are not going to be the make or break piece long term for anybody. It's going to come down to if Matty and Shane develop, or if those other drafted players develop, that your high drafted players turn into those franchise changing players.
Exactly. So that's it for the Armchair GM questions. Next, we get into the hypothetical / counterfactual category. I wasn't really sure what else to call this category of questions, but we'll start with 7, and we'll just go rapid fire questions here from Hammer. We'll hammer away at these. So first of all, whose room should this be, and why isn't it 62, meaning Brandon Montour? I mean, I think it should be Brandon Montour's locker room. I think he should be captain. If it was up to me, he would have been named captain instead of Eberle. So it should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Why isn't Matty Beniers on the first PK unit? Chandler Stevenson's face-off ability, or perceived face-off ability, I think would be the quick answer.
Yeah, and that's certainly what's basically been communicated to us.
Yeah. Why isn't Shane Wright on the first power play unit? I think, look, he's not scoring a bunch. Shooting, he hasn't had that shooting mentality. I think they maybe want him to go earn it 5-on-5, and also just developing him is not a priority. Otherwise, he would just get that opportunity from the start, and he'd run with it or not. But as we've covered before, like, they don't really prioritize that.
Yeah, I think this one is an example of certainly this year he has not earned it on the second unit power play. He far too often gets covered up by defenders. Like, he has not been good about opening up passing lanes to be a one-timer threat. He's one of the few potential one-timer threats with a right-handed shot that this team has. There's no reason he shouldn't be a focal point of the second unit power play. But he has not done a good job of allowing himself to be. If you watch him out there on the power play, he always tries to sneak in close to the goal. He wants to be kind of in and around there instead of more in a shooting position. And when he does that, he has a defender directly in his passing lane to the puck on the other side of the ice. And he has not done a good job of making himself available. And I think it's one of those things, until he starts making himself available out there on the second unit power play and starts getting going there, why put him on the first unit power play, right? You at least need somebody over there who's going to try to get open and work on those things. It's strictly, I think, at this point, Shane Wright and him just kind of learning those things on the second unit before he can be promoted.
Yeah, and again, that's fair if you're looking at it from a near-term perspective, right? It's just, as you said a couple of weeks ago, right? Sometimes you give those players are often given special treatment because you need them to be special. It's a case of that. Next, why is Mason Marchment on the power play? Not anymore. Problem solved.
Yep.
Then why is Stevenson on the PK period? Face-offs or perceived face-off ability. Why not play Stevenson third line matchups? We did cover this a little bit last week. He's a veteran player. They believe they will be better off playing him in those top line matchups. And at least of late, he's done okay in those. In the last few games, he's actually done all right. You got to hand it to him. And then how many can and then will we trade of McCann, Schwartz, Marchment? Well, that one's been done. Tolvin and Eberle, and then like of the D, Alexiak, Larson, Lindgren, and Evans. I mean, won't go into like too much depth on this. I think they can trade all of them except maybe Adam Larson because he's got that no move clause, and I just don't think he's gonna. Or is it full no trade? Sorry, full no trade. I don't think he's gonna waive it. That's not really possible. But all of them, I think, can be traded.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Then next question, two questions here from Greg. Would it have been better to build these around these young players, Wright and Beniers, with the young players that could have been traded for, Zegras, Peterka, or DeBrincat, instead of the cups in the room that Ron Francis wanted to do? I know hindsight is 50-50. So looking at the hindsight there, look, I think, probably, possibly any other alternative way to go about it would have been better. But someone like DeBrincat, I don't think he was a realistic possibility. And it would have been, I think, good to take some swings on the younger players. But like, really, it's just it's a bigger picture thing of just giving them opportunity rather than like the players around them. I don't even think that's the biggest issue.
No, I do think like at some point the players around them matter. Like with Matty Beniers, I do wonder if, say having an Alex DeBrincat on one side and Jordan Eberle or Jared McCann on the other, what does that do for Matty's numbers and his offensive growth? It probably helps. You know what I mean? But yeah, DeBrincat was never going to be an option because he had just a very small number of teams he wanted to be moved to. The Kraken were not on that list. He wanted to be around that Michigan area. So that was just never going to happen. As much as I think he was a good fit, Zegras, I just don't think was a huge fit because he needed to play center and you have too many. So there was no point in trading for Trevor Zegras. And with JJ Peterka, I do think they should have gone out there and tried to do that. Like, I don't know why the Kraken weren't really kind of involved in that because he is a younger player, a goal scoring winger. Again, can't help but feel like if you had that on Matty Beniers or Shane Wright's wing, it would not help take something off of them and help them then just play with a little bit more time and space. I think that would help certainly a Shane Wright a lot. I think one of the things we don't talk about a lot with Shane is that he needs to gain more confidence shooting the puck. I think one of the things he keeps looking for out there is a lot of space, like a junior level amount of space before he takes the shot. I think he needs to learn that he's just got smaller windows in the NHL and he needs to take the shots when he can. I think having a Peterka on his wing would help give him a little bit more space as he tries to play down the middle there, just because they have to respect somebody like JJ Peterka in a way that they don't have to respect, say, Yanni Newman yet. And so I think that there would have been something there. And he wasn't really traded for that much. I don't know why the Kraken weren't involved in that one.
Yeah, they wanted a specific type of player, I think, in that like defensive right-handed defenseman who was young and Kesselring. I mean, I think that Sabres made a mistake there, but that I guess would be the one argument you could make. And then another one from Greg: do you believe that nobody wanted to make trades either with the Kraken the first few years, or were the Kraken being too conservative? No, I don't buy that talking point that nobody wanted to make trades with the Kraken. You know, whether it's expansion draft or the first few years or whatever. I think that's ridiculous.
We saw them
And
do it. They did make a lot of trades. Like, not so much for the expansion draft, but they traded a couple pieces from the expansion draft for picks. But that first year at that deadline, remember, it was a fire sale.
yeah, teams absolutely made trades with them. And I think the Kraken were in a position they could have done a lot more wheeling and dealing. And I would include even at the expansion draft. I know the common saying is just, well, yeah, look, they teams got burned by Vegas. They were just unwilling to deal with Seattle at any price. I don't believe that at all. And if it is true, it's every bit as damning on Seattle management and Ron Francis as if they, you couldn't get the deals done. So I don't buy that at all. Next question here from Daniel: do you think Morgan Geekie would have been able to blossom into the league-leading goal-scoring star he has become if the Bruins hadn't provided opportunity for him by stripping their roster down to the studs? Are moves as drastic as the ones Boston has made in the last couple of years necessary to get the most out of young talent? I do have a bit of an issue with just the premise of this one, because I think the Bruins didn't really strip it down to the studs as far as their roster. One, they signed a lot of free agents to try and fill some of those holes right away with, of course, Bergeron and Krejci leaving. But the biggest thing was they kept Pasternak. They kept their superstar winger in David Pasternak. And Morgan Geekie, I think, certainly does not have that level of success or development if he's not playing with David Pasternak. I think that's the biggest thing. And we get asked about Morgan Geekie time and time again about, the Kraken keep him. Could he have done this with the Kraken? Simple answer is no, just because the Kraken never got a star player for him to play with like Pasternak.
Yeah, I think there was an element of he was all of a sudden thrust onto a first line, right, to be in that situation of playing with David Pasternak versus being a fourth line center in Seattle. And so, like, there is an element of just getting that additional playing time. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, it's literally what I was just talking about. Like, Peterka could have potentially brought to, say, Shane Wright. Defenses have to focus so much on David Pasternak when you're out there that Morgan Geekie, if you were to look at the amount of time and space he has, it's no wonder that he was able to then, have the opportunity to go and blossom into the player that he's become. And since then, he no longer plays with Pasta. He's on a different line than Pasta most nights, as Elias Lindholm is really centering Pasta this year. But Morgan Geekie was given that opportunity to develop and turn into the player that he is. And he still gets to be on a power play unit with David Pasternak and all of those things that kind of help him succeed. So there is an element to, when you're a young developing player, having a player out there that not only can they, finish on the passes that you send them, or they're going to send you really good passes and put you in a good spot to score. Just the fact that defenses might give you an extra foot of space. And that's literally can be the difference out there for guys, is literally just 12 inches of space, allowing you to then, really make sure that your shot is solid, that you're getting it off clean, that you're able to pick your spot in your corner, rather than having to rush it that little bit that just causes it to miss the net or go right into the goalie's chest. And I think David Pasternak allowed Morgan Geekie to do that a big, big way.
Yeah, there are so many benefits in so many different ways, from having legitimate star players on your team, how they can help you develop other players, what they do for you on the ice, night in, night out. It's just so important to have those players on your team. Now, one more question from Daniel. If you could have 3 former Kraken players back, which would you want back? And I like this question. This is a fun one. I got to imagine Morgan Geekie's on both of our lists.
Yeah, I think that's a safe one. We just go with
probably Ryan Donato on both of our lists.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the third one for me, I don't know, it might be different for you, Alex Wenberg.
Yeah, I mean, because again, if you have Wenny, you don't probably end up with Stevenson, and I think Wenberg is just a better fit for the group than what Stevenson is.
Yeah, and if you had both, like if you just got Wenberg back right now and you still have Stevenson, it would allow you to then move Stevenson for whatever cost you could, eat whatever money, just get him off the team, and you could have Wenberg slot into that role, and I think be a better fit, certainly under Lane Lambert's system, for that role of just playing those tough matchups. But that's a fun question there from Daniel. All right, 2 categories left as we're nearing the hour mark. We can probably fit this in.
Mhm.
So big picture stuff from Aaron. If the team crashes out again and doesn't make the playoffs, who pays the price? Francis, coaches? I hate to say this, but I think the most likely outcome is probably nobody does. I still think the most likely result of that would be that the management team gets another year, because Bottrill, it's his first year as GM. It's not really fair. He hasn't got the chance to really make his the roster in his image, and then you can't fire the coach. Like, you just had 3 coaches in 3 years, can't have 4 coaches in 4 years. So yeah, I mean, I think in short, nobody does.
The only thing would be, I think it could still come down to how Jason Bottrill handles the trade deadline. If the team doesn't make the moves necessary at the deadline, or the returns for the veteran players that he gives away that causes things to be really ugly for the last 2 months of the season, just don't feel like they were worth it. I do think at some point ownership is going to look at the fan reactions to everything, and we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks, and you can just kind of see it going out there amongst the fan base. If they genuinely feel like their bottom line could be affected by not making a change and not having the PR around a new front office, I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. And so if Bottrill is able to really win at the trade deadline and everybody's excited about all the assets brought in, and they're able to kind of sell the idea of more of a rebuilding approach, and they're going to get a top pick, top 5 pick this year in the draft and all of that, I think there's enough excitement amongst the fan base that ownership doesn't then move on from the front office. But if they fumble the trade deadline, or they ultimately decide that they are close enough and they don't want to sell off completely, and then the team craters over the course of the rest of that year, and all these free agents walk away for nothing, I think the fan reaction might be enough to the point where we see the front office go and they can say, look, with the Ron Francis plan, we gave you 5 years, and the team is literally no better off than we were before that 5 years started. I do feel like that's enough of a runway that I could see ownership wanting to make a change and potentially go in a different direction there.
Maybe. I mean, maybe it's me being jaded from the last 3 years of this team, but I think, they'll make the little trades they do at the deadline. They'll tout those as success, whatever they are. And
they're going to try to sell that, but there's a big difference in whether or not the fans buy it or not. And I'm saying it comes down to if the fans base doesn't. Like right now, the fan base is pretty loudly saying they don't want this to continue.
I mean, it may just come down to season ticket renewals for the 5-year people that expire. It's probably just going to come down to that.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's all going to come down to the dollars and cents of it all.
Yeah. So next question for Paul. What are the odds they clean house? We kind of addressed this. What are the odds they clean house, turn the entire operation over to a Lamoriello or Shanahan? I'd say as close to 0 as you can get for all of that coming together. I think odds they clean house, we just talked about it. As for Lamoriello or Shanahan, I mean, Lou Lamoriello is 83 years old. They're not turning anything over to him. And then Shanahan, he screwed up the Leafs so badly. I would hope not, I guess, would be my answer there.
Yeah, but I think they are committed to this idea of you hire a president and you give the president a long runway. Essentially what they've done with Ron.
Which I don't mind that process in general. Just do not pick one of those 2 guys.
Yes, I think Shanahan would be the wrong guy to pick, but I mean, he has cachet, and that plays.
It does. All right, let's stop talking about this. Let's stop talking about it. All right. This question from George. Do you think ownership has a real desire to win a Stanley Cup? It looks like they only care about short-term revenue with no concern for long-term success. Do they actually care about building a true winner, or are the Kraken simply a stepping stone to bringing in the Sonics? So I have some thoughts on this, and I've talked about it in the past in comparison with Vegas. I think probably on a previous mailbag. It reminds me of one of the questions we got from that, but I'll try and be quick. I think ownership would like to win a Stanley Cup for sure. I mean, in the same way that everybody wants good things to happen generally. Here's the thing. I don't think they have a vision for how to get there. And more importantly, I don't think they have a standard for organizational success. Compare that with Vegas. You look at their ownership. Foley said from day one, Cup in 6, winning the Cup in 6 years. That was the goal. And they would be judged on that concrete level of success. The Kraken have never set a standard for success or a timeline which they expect to achieve it. Never. Not once have they ever done that. And I think that's the big difference. I think a lot of the organization's problems stem from that. When there's no defined standards, it is really difficult to have accountability and a whole bunch of other things down the line that I think is a result of that. So, I mean, I guess in short, I think they want to win. Of course they do. But I don't think they need to win. And I don't think they have that standard to win in any kind of concrete way.
Yeah, I think there's certainly that that element of it, which is a pretty substantial one. I think as far as like ownership's commitment to winning, I do genuinely think they are committed to winning and they want to win. I think like again, they've maybe diluted themselves this year into the idea that they could win and be successful this year. But the important thing to remember, particularly for this fan base, for the Kraken fan base, and for the people in Seattle specifically, this is an ownership group that has no problem spending to the cap if they feel like it's going to let them win. Was it Jay Fresh or was it the Athletic that did the ownership survey
Oh, yeah.
recently?
That was crazy. It was the Athletic. And for
Yeah.
willingness to spend, the Kraken ranked 20th, I believe, in the NHL.
On the fan survey.
On the fan survey. And I think that highlights a pretty big misconception. I'll let you cover the rest of it, but this is very different than, say, the Mariners. This ownership group will spare no expense on not just on player salaries, but facilities, everything.
And coaches, right? Like they're paying
Coaches,
3 coaches right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like because they are committed to winning and trying to right the ship. And yes, is there going to be elements of they want to right the ship because it's better financially in the short term? Yes. But I do genuinely believe that they want to build a strong contender. That's why they bought in and hired Ron Francis to begin with. Was what Ron Francis was selling all along through the expansion process was he wanted to kind of build it the right way, 3 to 5 year timeline, all of that stuff. Obviously, it has not come together, but I think that that's a separate issue. When, again, going back to the interview process, when ownership was trying to decide who was going to create this organization, they went with somebody who was saying that they wanted to take the longer approach and try to do it that right way. So they already have shown a willingness to do the rebuild approach and all of that stuff because that's what they signed up for in the beginning. It has not gone well at all, but I think that that's a different thing as far as what expectation ownership was willing to sign up for. And then the financial side of things where they are willing to spend money, they're willing to go to the cap. That is very significant. And I think that that is something that, yes, for Seattle specific area fans, you need to understand that this group is completely different than the Mariners. They are willing to spend that money if it makes sense, and they are willing to go out there and try to put together a winning roster via a big signing or a big trade or whatever, because they do understand that that's what it takes. It's just, it hasn't, again, the person making those decisions on where to spend that money hasn't done a good job and it hasn't worked. And that's different than ownership's willingness to do it. And I think that that's something that the fan base doesn't totally have right now, because frankly, the Mariners, and understandably so, have jaded everybody.
Yeah. And speaking of the Mariners, a question here from Greg. You spoke on Monday's podcast about players not speaking up about the lack of talent on the roster, and you both generally agreed they shouldn't. Cal Raleigh is beloved in this town for speaking up. Clearly different organizations, completely different times in their life cycle. And Cal spoke up late in the season after the season ended. Do you feel it would ever be appropriate for a veteran player to speak up? Now, if they had the same problems as the Mariners, I think so. But as we just discussed, the issues are very different. For the Mariners, it's a willingness of ownership to devote resources. And for the Kraken, it's that the resources are very much there, just used unwisely. And so I think from a player to speak up from that perspective, it's a lot easier to say, look, we're so close. We're a good team. We just need a little more help. Like, look, come on, help us out, which doesn't imply anything negative about your direct boss, the GM, right? To say that GM should have more resources. Whereas if you want to make an accurate complaint as a player for the Kraken, you kind of have to imply that the GM is doing a poor job by putting a bad roster together, given that he has all the resources he could possibly have, not to mention what that implies about your teammates too, about just the group. So I just don't think it's really, it doesn't make sense in the Kraken situation.
Yeah, it's not a 1-for-1. If the Kraken were in the same situation as the Mariners, I would say, yeah, somebody should say so.
Agreed.
Right? If it's like, okay, there's one obvious kind of glaring weakness here and the team has, say, $5 million in cap space. Yeah, I'd want Jordan Eberle to go out there and be like, look, we just need one more shooter on the right side, right? Or we just need one more guy who can move the puck on the back end, something like that. And we know we're there and we know we can get there. That's so different than being, than basically trying to say, like, if you're say Maddie or Shane, like, oh, I need Chandler Stevenson out of the way so that I can get more minutes. Right? Like, it just, it's a completely different thing. Or it's, I just don't have any faith in the person who's writing my checks. I need somebody else. Like you can't say that. It just doesn't work. I mean, it works if you really want to get out of town quickly and be traded probably to a team that's also not great. Because no good team wants a player who's going to have come out and said that. So there's zero incentive for the player to do it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, would not recommend. So final category here, and it's the other category. And I do love these. This one from Paul. I took my family to Sunday's game against the Sabres. It was our first game of the year, and the energy was the lowest we've ever felt in Climate Pledge Arena. Assuming no major changes during the season, how do I convince my family to attend another game based on that product? Sales time, guys. All right, Dylan, do you want to start or should I start? Because I think you're usually better at selling these things, looking on the bright side, but I feel like that's flipped a little bit this season.
It's flipped a little bit. I mean, I will say, like, the one option to go with, and certainly one of the things that gets me kind of pumped up for some games versus others, is the talent that the Kraken are going to be playing against. And I know if you're a fan and you want to get your family involved and have them have that same passion you have and share that with them, maybe that's not the greatest way of going about it. But going to a game against Colorado right now, and obviously the Kraken were able to put together a good effort there. I feel like that kind of helps just because you're at least going to see some form of high level play from somebody, and that kind of helps a little bit. Granted, I'm more of a guy who like focuses on different things in sports, so I don't know that totally plays. If you just genuinely want it to be a positive Kraken experience and the Kraken look good, wait until Chicago comes back through town.
Pick
Columbus.
and choose the opponents a little bit.
Yeah, you basically have to cherry pick and just go to games against really bad teams.
Yeah, I think that does seem to be the theme. And well, you took my main point there because personally, I love it. I love looking at the away teams. I like getting to see kind of stuff around the league, getting to know players you don't normally follow. What are what are their habits? What stands out to you about those players? I love it. I'm every time, of course, we cover the Kraken. We got to be focused on them, but I focus a lot on the away team as well. And who knows, whatever player you're looking at could maybe be a future Kraken one day. And then you'll have known them and have heard of them, dating back, and you can kind of see what their tendencies are. So yeah. I always enjoy that, but you're right. I don't know that it plays for, like, say, a whole family, that everyone would be interested in that sort of thing.
And I guess the other thing would be is if you're trying to get somebody, a family member, friends, whatever, into hockey right now, the way to do that might be go to a torrent game. It's going to be cheaper. Go to a torrent game, watch some of the best players in the world on that team and the excitement that team has. Get them to fall in love with the live experience of the sport there, and then transition them over into the Kraken once they already like it and they kind of get what's going on and stuff like that. That might be the approach that I would go with if I had like a significant other or a family member that wasn't really sold on the idea of being a sports fan or being a hockey fan. I think I would probably go the torrent route right now because I just think it's a better place for entry.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, live hockey at the highest level too, it's just really good and entertaining. By and large, I think it is, especially for newer fans. I've seen so many posts online from fans who are like, well, I went to this Kraken game. Sorry about the result, but it was my first hockey game and I love it. And I want to know more. Yep. Like, how's it? So, it still has that effect, I think, especially for newer fans. Next question from Sarah. What's more cursed, post-game live on a Tuesday or Kraken trying to hold on to a lead? Well, hey, given that they held on to a lead in their last game, I know this was after the question was posed. I'll say post-game live on a Tuesday. That one seems more cursed given that they just haven't gotten a win there, even though I hate to have that choice to make. I will say it was nice getting to meet up with you, Sarah, in Vancouver, as our paths kind of crossed on my Vancouver trip. So it was good getting to see you there.
Yeah, and shout out post game live tomorrow after their game in Los Angeles against the LA Kings. Make sure to join us for that cursed experience. RJ will be there at the building. Get to join us from crypto.com arena, your first time doing that. So that should be fun.
Actually, I'm not going to be there. Adding to the curse, maybe take you away from it. So yeah, actually, I will not be there.
Okay, never mind.
So there you go.
You can tell we communicate a lot about these things. But I think at this point, unfortunately, it's the post-game live. Again, I've promised that we are reviewing the schedule, and once we kind of figure out things in the new year with Red Glare going public and everything like that, we'll try to shake things up in some way and avoid that curse.
Yeah, we are looking into it. This one from Jeff.
I was gonna say, that being said, during this last like month and a half, I don't know that picking any other day of the week would not have felt equally cursed.
That's true. Yeah, I think part of it's just a reality of this team. So we'll see, and who knows? Maybe the results would have been different had we picked the other day.
If you see a pattern out there for the Kraken performances
Let us know.
that we're not seeing from these last little bit, let us know, please.
Yeah, it'll be helpful. So this one from Jeff, who has some Blue Jackets ties. Would you rather be the Kraken or Blue Jackets right now? Who has the brighter near-term future? Sorry, but I got to say the Blue Jackets. They have a legit star player in Zach Werenski. I like Adam Fantilli, as a good defense first center. Marchenko is a better player than the Kraken have ever had. I like their pipeline a little bit better too. And I just think if they're better right now, and also if they want to tear it down, they've got more pieces to get more assets and kind of rebuild with things. I wouldn't want to have gone through what the Blue Jackets have in their whole franchise history, but I think if you're just starting right now with everything, and also I trust their management a lot more, so I'd go Blue Jackets.
Yeah, probably. I just think some of it is that they're further along in the process that the Kraken realistically have to go down, which is building from the bottom up. And so there's an element where it seems like the grass is greener on the Columbus side of things, specifically because they're just further along in that process. And so some of the young players that they've drafted and developed are just further along in that than the Kraken are, and especially because the Kraken kind of have to, in a lot of ways, start that process still, or at least commit to it in a way. And so I think for that reason, yeah, it certainly looks like Columbus is the better setup at the moment. But I think a large portion of that is just they've dedicated more time to it.
Yeah. And the downside, though, is you do have to play in the Eastern Conference, which is absolutely stacked. Blue Jackets doing better than the Kraken, and they're still last in the East. So I guess there is that downside. And then I love this bonus question from Jeff. Which non-NHL team is the closest comp to the Kraken situation? And then for me, outside of the coach turnovers, I find a decent amount of similarities to the Portland Trail Blazers. So I don't know basketball that well, I'll admit. You know it better than I do, Dylan. I'm really curious because we haven't talked about this or consulted on this. What team or teams you picked for the closest comp to the Kraken situation? Because you follow a broader range of sports than I do.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. Because I was really trying to find like what league also kind of works as like the most equivalent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because my only real frame of reference is the NFL, and that's totally different. That just works very differently, but that's all I had to go off of.
Right, because like for me, the first NFL team that came to mind, tell me if I'm wrong here, Miami Dolphins.
I thought about them. And there's something to it there because they just don't have. I mean,
it's them or a different Florida team.
Oh, you think so?
The Jags, yeah.
Well, the thing is, the Jags, I believe they still do have their franchise quarterback. Like they can build enough around that. They have that.
Yeah, but is he not like
also they're going to be a playoff team this
equivalent of franchise player?
I guess so, but they have a playoff team this year. That was one thing that I ruled out, is like you can't have like an actual good team this year.
Okay, well then what did you go with there in the NFL side of things?
So my two picks were either the New Orleans Saints, because I think ever since, and I'm just going off the last 5 years of like whatever teams, as long as the Kraken have been around, I think they've been kind of the poster team for being bad unintentionally, but not really embracing the rebuild that they need to go through. Kind of swapping out different quarterbacks, like, Derek Carr or Andy Dalton they had for a year, but keeping largely the same, still having Taysom Hill run around and do all the things he does. Like it just feels like they're kind of stuck in that same rut, need to accept reality in the same way. And it hasn't led to them being good in the last 5 years. The other team, and I hate to make this comparison, but the Jets, the New York Jets, because I think about a few different like elements of it, but you had that second overall pick that should have been the answer. You draft Zach Wilson. He's not quite good enough, to be like that franchise guy. So you're kind of trying to adjust from that. Also, bringing in veteran players and stuff like Aaron Rodgers, trying to free agent your way out of it, not working. Also, the guy who got away, Sam Darnold, compared to Morgan Geekie. who's having more, probably couldn't have ever had success there, but he's having more success in a good situation elsewhere. I couldn't find really a good comp, but those are just the two best that I thought of.
Yeah, the problem with the Jets is that there's just like so much additional baggage that goes
That's
into
true.
that.
And the Kraken don't have
And it's
that.
like ownership problems and all
Yeah,
of
the
that kind
Kraken
of
don't
stuff
have that.
that the Kraken don't have. And so
Saints were my number one, but
yeah. NBA wise, I don't hate the Trailblazers comp. I think like Sacramento, just because like they've had in like recent times good players, but it just didn't quite fully gel and things like that. And then it all kind of, fell apart and got away from them and they're struggling again. Those are kind of like teams that come to mind there on that side of things. You could argue, I guess, like Dallas post Luka Doncic. Like the Kraken never had like a Luka Doncic level player to like get rid of, and they obviously didn't go to the finals in the last couple seasons. But if you just like look purely at where the Mavs are, it's like you've got pieces. You could probably be around 500. Your best player is just like always hurt in Anthony Davis and Jared McCann, right? Like, so there's like maybe something there.
yeah, interesting comps there. I'm glad you give some insight on the basketball side, but I love that question. It
Questionable
made me
front
think a
office.
lot. Huh?
Questionable front office.
Yeah, there is that. So 2 questions left to go here. This one from Commodore Schmidlap. Since Heated Rivalry has got some buzz lately, what's your favorite hockey-based media? Movie, TV show, book, etc.?
This is tough because so much of the hockey media I consume is like nonfiction. And so if it has to be fictional like Heated Rivalry, I mean the classic is the Mighty Ducks. It's like the most boring answer in the world,
That's
but
my answer too.
there is just something about that film that is just like kind of perfect and it captures the magic of playing youth hockey. And that's the most universal experience any of us could probably have. It's one thing to like I wasn't alive in the 70s, so Slapshot, there's just like a lot of the stuff about the life around the team that is I'm just never going to relate to. And certainly I've never played like minor league hockey or anything like that, but what I can relate to is playing youth hockey and that whole experience of being a kid and how much you look forward to skating with your teammates and being with friends and all of that kind of stuff. And so I guess the easy answer there is the Mighty Ducks.
Yeah, I mean, if you grew up in our generation playing youth hockey, as we both did, especially in the state of California, and just having watched those movies, I don't think your answer could be anything different. I will give one alternate answer, though, and this is just my favorite from how the hockey is actually like portrayed in there. My favorite, just kind of watching the hockey itself, because I think it's really difficult to shoot hockey for some, movie or TV show or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to make it look realistic. The Mighty Ducks certainly doesn't really make it look all that realistic.
No, that's not the point. Yeah,
that's not the point, exactly. But the one I think where they do the best job of portraying the actual hockey is Inside Out and Inside Out 2. Those 2 movies, I think they do a fantastic job on the actual hockey itself. And I just enjoy the hockey scenes because it looks, I don't know, it just looks kind of realistic. And I just like how the plays going back and forth. I love how they do it.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer there. Lots of people say Miracle all the time. That again feels like it's kind of played out. And frankly, like I just feel like so much of the actual like documentaries and stuff around that team are better than the movie. Like it's just more informative than the movie. And so I've never liked Miracle because I could just watch, there's a good 30 for 30 on that and stuff, right? You can watch instead, get more full context around things. I think actually some of the best stuff for that is the documentaries on those Soviet teams and what they were going through during that process and everything. Really interesting and just provides that different perspective than what you just kind of culturally have growing up right around the Miracle on Ice team. I guess if I had to pick something else that's like more personal, it's on Disney Plus, but the Mighty Ducks, when they launched, had an animated series where they had anthropomorphized ducks from another world, Puck World, who were kicked off, whose planet was enslaved, and a group of them, led by Wild Wing, escaped through a wormhole, came to Earth, joined the Mighty Ducks hockey team, and so they were NHL players by day, fighting for their planet's freedom by night as like vigilantes in Anaheim. And they're just like 6 foot tall duck people. And it combined everything that I love, right? It's sci-fi, it's hockey, It's a fun cartoon, and Tim Curry voiced the alien bad guy, and you can't get better than that.
Yeah, you've told me about this in the past. I don't think I've actually given it a chance watching it, but I think it would be entertaining. I should just throw it on Disney Plus. Check it out.
What?
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Wild Wing's mask is this special mask that allows him to see the invisible bad guys. It's like the one key to the resistance that they're leading is Wild Wing's mask, and that's why he has it.
That's crazy.
That and he's the goalie when they would just play, in the street.
Yeah, and dual purpose,
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Joey Decord needs a mask that lets him just like kind of hunt out bad guys.
Jim Belushi voices their manager, who puts together the team and everything. Like it's not terrible.
We could turn this into a 2-hour podcast just getting into that, but I will get on to our final question here from Fiona. If there was an all NHL coach versus ref game, who do you think would win? For me, the answer is easy. I feel like you'll probably agree, but refs all day. Like they're surprisingly, like they're very good skaters. Like you don't see it necessarily because you're focused on the players. They've got to be great skaters. Remember, they're out there the whole game. And I think by and large, they're much younger. I think there'd be some older coaches in the NHL that really would not pull their weight versus all the refs have to be in good shape.
Yeah, the refs would definitely take it. Just I think the age factor alone helps, but also refs right now are more and more being pulled from the group of recently retired players. Obviously not NHL level players, but players from, the minor league systems from Europe and stuff like that. And so you're talking about not just guys that are younger in general, but also guys who recently played and played and still at high levels, right? And I know that that's been controversial. That's a whole topic for a Red Glare at some point that I want to have with you, RJ, is the controversy around pulling refs that are just essentially capable of keeping up with today's NHL. So prioritizing former, recently retired players and guys who can skate versus going through the proper steps to become NHL referees and the years of experience needed to understand the nuances out there. Cause that's a big controversy right now internally within the world of the NHL that doesn't really get talked about or covered, but it's very much something that is there for the relevant bodies. But it's just like, it just kind of is there as a supporting argument to why the refs would absolutely dominate out there. You'd certainly have some coaches capable of going out there and really giving those refs a hard time. But I don't know that you could roll, say, 4 full lines capable of keeping up with things like that. It would be Rod Brindamore having to put a lot of guys on his shoulders and try to make something happen.
Yeah, for sure. I think you might have to shorten the bench a little bit. But you know what? If anyone's going to understand that, I think it's the NHL coaches.
It's the coaches, yeah. I think you'd also, quite frankly, that's a lot of ego. It's a lot of guys used to making decisions and being the shot caller.
Oh, you're right.
All being thrown into a situation. Who decides who's going over the boards for that key PK faceoff draw? You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be discussions around that. I don't know that you're always going to have a lot of cohesion there.
Yeah, that is true. I bet you'll have some players butting heads. Yeah, refs all day. That if I'm the more I think about it, the more I know.
It's not even close.
Refs win that, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks everyone for the questions. That does it. Hey, we got under an hour and a half. That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it is pretty good. Yeah, no, it's good stuff. I especially like those last 2 questions there. Have you watched Heated Rivalry at all?
No, I haven't.
Okay, you haven't watched it yet. I watched it, and I watched the first 2 episodes, and the business side of it and the hockey side of it is just so unrealistic. I was having a really hard time not just getting thrown out
that would bother
immediately. It's really rough, and especially as somebody who grew up during the Crosby Ovechkin thing. And it's so heavily pulled from that, but very cherry picked and selected. That was also kind of difficult for me kind of getting through it. Cause I was like, well, I know the real story there. And because it played out over the course of years and wasn't having to be crammed into a 45-minute episode, it was more interesting in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that would bug me.
It was, I mean, even Julia was like, okay, this is a little ridiculous, some of these scenarios hockey wise. All right. Yeah, no, this was a good mailbag. I had a lot of fun with this one, and hopefully everybody enjoyed listening to it as well.
Yeah. And Dylan, enjoy the game tonight. We just talked about the Mighty Ducks. You're going to go see the Anaheim Ducks face off against the Kraken tonight. All right. Before the podcast is over, what do you think? What do you think we see? tonight. What kind of luck are you going to bring to the building, Dylan?
I mean, I think the Kraken have some momentum. That's not something they're used to playing with, but I think that there's something there. I think the Ducks can go, either way really easily. It's their last game before the break, so maybe in their minds they're already in vacation mode, and maybe the Kraken can take advantage of that. I genuinely though think that if the Kraken are probably going to split these next two games, today and tomorrow, the Kraken just play so well at Crypto.com Arena, and the Kings are just struggling so much. And the Kraken did beat the Kings not that long ago. If I had to guess, I think today would be the loss, tomorrow would be the win. That being said, I could really easily see today's game being an OTL. Just both the Kraken and the Ducks love to play for overtime. So if it's close at all late in this one, I think both teams are wanting it to be a 3-point game.
Yeah, and a bit of luck for the Kraken here. Leo Carlson's going to miss his first game of the season tonight. He's out with a lower body injury, so no Leo Carlson.
That's huge.
That is huge. Ducks without their best player. So, I mean, it makes it a whole lot more winnable for the Kraken tonight.
Yeah, got to go adjust my fantasy team now. So,
yep, go make those moves. Go make those moves. And yeah, thanks everyone for the questions. This was great.
Yeah, and thanks, of course, to the offices of Rico Tessendorf for sponsoring the podcast, as he does each and every week. And while we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. It's going to do it for the pod, everybody. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see y'all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.